Somewhere in Las Vegas, in the weeks after the summer of 2017, a woman sat down and watched a video on her phone. The woman was Celine Dion. The video was a 9-year-old girl from Hong Kong standing on the stage of America's Got Talent, drawing a breath, and then singing My Heart Will Go On with a voice that had no business belonging to a child. Celine Dion watched it, and then she made a phone call. The little girl on the other end of that call had been named after her, had grown up singing her songs in a small apartment in Hong Kong, had pressed her face close to speakers trying to understand how a human throat could make sounds like that, had chosen, at 9 years old, to walk out onto the biggest stage in American television and offer that woman's most iconic song back to the world, as a gift, or a prayer, or both. She had no idea the woman herself was watching. This is the story of what happened before that call and what happened after. It is a story about a name that carries weight, a father who gave everything and was accused of taking too much, a little girl who sang her way into a dream so specific it had someone else's face on it, and what it costs and what it gives you when the dream actually comes true. She was born on November 22, 2007 in Hong Kong, and before she could walk steadily, before she had opinions about anything except food and sleep, her father had already given her a name she would have to grow into. Dr. Steve Tam was a voice teacher. Music wasn't a hobby in the Tam household. It was the furniture of daily life, the background hum of every morning. Steve sang around the house the way other fathers hummed without thinking, except Steve thought about it deeply, professionally, with the attentive ear of a man who understood what a voice could become with the right tending. He named his daughter Celine, after Celine Dion. It is worth pausing on that for a moment. Not Celine as a pretty name that happened to belong to a famous singer. Celine as a deliberate inheritance, a quiet statement of faith from a music teacher who believed, even then, that his daughter might one day deserve to share that syllable. Celine grew up copying him. That is how she described it herself. Years later, he kept singing and singing and singing, and I just started copying him. But what began as imitation became, very quickly, something the imitation couldn't contain. The voice that emerged from this small girl was not a child's approximation of adult singing. It was something structurally different. A fullness, a control, a capacity for emotional weight that made adults go quiet when they heard it. When she was 7, she performed You Raise Me Up on a Chinese television program called Let's Sing Kids. The audience's reaction was not polite applause for a cute child. It was the slightly stunned silence of people recalibrating what they thought they knew. Judges leaned forward. Viewers at home called their families into the room. Clips spread across Chinese social media with a velocity that suggested something beyond novelty. This was recognition. Then came Little Big Shots in 2016, when she was 8, a show designed to showcase exceptional young talent. And Celine was that word's most precise definition. A duet with a young Canadian singer named Jeffrey Lee introduced her to Western audiences for the first time. The performance was shared millions of times. People who had never heard of Hong Kong's child singing scene now knew her name. She was 9 years old, and she was just getting started. The stage of America's Got Talent is designed to be intimidating. The lights come from above at an angle that makes the space feel enormous. The judges' table impossibly far away. The audience a dark mass beyond the brightness. Adults with decades of professional performance have walked out there and gone blank with fear. Celine Tam walked out in 2017 and looked like she belonged. She was 9. She wore a dress. She had chosen to sing My Heart Will Go On, the song most associated with the woman whose name she carried. And if there was any anxiety in her body, it didn't reach her voice. What came out of her, from the first note, was something that stilled the room. The audience, primed for charm, received something closer to astonishment. Simon Cowell, a man professionally allergic to unearned praise, watched her with an expression that people who study his reactions on that show had rarely seen. Undivided attention. She received a standing ovation before the song had finished. But here is the detail the highlight clips don't always capture. The weight of song choice. This wasn't a 9-year-old picking her favorite pop song. This was a child who understood, on some level that cannot be entirely explained by coaching, what that particular song meant, why it had endured, what it required of the person singing it. She wasn't performing the notes. She was inside the feeling. The golden buzzer came later, during her performance of How Am I Supposed to Live Without You, courtesy of guest judge Laverne Cox, who hit it without hesitation. The golden confetti fell. The audience erupted. Celine stood in the middle of it, smiling, but with something behind the smile that was harder to name. A child absorbing something too large to process in real time. She did not win America's Got Talent. She reached the semifinals and went no further. And then, quietly, numerically, unstoppably, her audition clip began its journey across the internet. 1 million views, 10 million, 50 million. The number that would eventually settle above 150 million is not an abstraction. It means that across the world, in languages Celine Tam didn't speak, in countries she had never visited, people were pressing play and going still and feeling something. A 9-year-old girl from Hong Kong was moving strangers on every continent. But here is what no one outside her family knew yet. In one of those viewings, in one of those moments of a person pressing play and going still, the viewer was Celine Dion. Fame, when it arrives at that velocity, does not arrive alone. In the months after America's Got Talent, as the view counts climbed and the interview requests multiplied and the appearance offers came in from venues Celine Tam had only seen on television, something else arrived too. Scrutiny. The particular, uncomfortable attention that fame directs not just at the famous person but at everyone standing close to them. Dr. Steve Tam had been beside his daughter at every step. He had trained her voice from the time she could carry a tune. He had traveled to every show, stood in every wing, been present for every audition, every performance, every camera. He was, by every observable measure, a devoted father doing what devoted fathers do. Clearing the path, carrying the bags, staying close. But the internet had questions. Dr. Tam was himself a singer. He had musical ambitions of his own, separate from his daughter's. And so the question began circulating, quietly at first, then with the grinding persistence of online speculation, whether his presence in Celine's career was motivated by fatherly love, or by something more self-serving. Whether he was her father or her manager or something more complicated than either word captured. The cruelty of this particular rumor is its unfalsifiability. A father who supports his daughter at every turn is either devoted or controlling. A father who has his own musical interests is either a man with a rich inner life or a man with an ulterior motive. The same facts can be assembled into either story depending on the instinct of the person arranging them. Dr. Tam addressed it directly. He gave interviews. He explained, with the patience of a man who understood that patience was the only available response, that Celine sang because singing made her happy, that his role was to help her pursue what she loved, that his own musical interests had no bearing on hers, and that the suggestion they did was a distortion of a relationship that was, at its foundation, simply a father and a daughter who both loved music. Some people believed him, others didn't. The rumor never fully died. It simply reached a temperature where it stopped being actively dangerous and became instead a low background noise, the kind of thing that attaches to a famous child's story and never entirely detaches. What the rumor missed, what those assembling it into its most unflattering shape consistently overlooked, was the girl at the center of it. Celine Tam had not been manufactured into a performer. She had become one organically, in the way that children become what they are meant to be when someone pays close enough attention to give them the conditions they need. The voice was hers. The joy was hers. Every person who had ever watched her perform live, who had stood close enough to see her face while she sang, reported the same thing. She was there, completely, in the music. Not executing. Not performing. Present. That is not a thing a father can engineer. That is a thing a child either has or doesn't. And there was one person, above all others, who recognized exactly what Celine Tam had, because she had once had to figure out the same thing about herself. The call came in late 2017. Celine Dion had watched the video. She had watched it more than once. And she had decided that the child who sang her song with that particular quality of devotion, the child who had been named after her, deserved to hear what Celine Dion thought of what she had heard. The invitation was personal and specific. Come to Las Vegas. Come to the residency. Come backstage. Celine Tam was 10 years old. She had been named after this woman. She had spent years studying recordings of this voice, trying to understand its mechanics, its emotional range, the way it could hold a note at the edge of breaking without ever breaking. She had stood on a stage and offered this woman's most famous song to the world as an act of tribute. And now she was walking through a backstage corridor in Las Vegas toward a dressing room where Celine Dion was waiting to meet her. The meeting was, by all accounts, warm and genuine. Not the polished warmth of a celebrity fulfilling an obligation, but the real warmth of one singer recognizing another across the barrier of age and circumstance. Dion praised her. She told her she was talented. She told her to keep going. She talked about the work, the daily, unglamorous, necessary work of maintaining a voice, of staying true to the feeling that makes the technique worth having. For a 10-year-old girl, these words came from the most authoritative possible source. This wasn't encouragement from a judge or a producer or a parent who loved her. This was the woman the dream had been modeled on, saying, "Yes, this is real, and you should trust it. But here is the thing about moments of pure fulfillment. They require you, afterward, to answer a question you may not have expected." Now what Celine Tam had wanted, had perhaps needed, that meeting. She had achieved it through talent and nerve and the extraordinary circumstance of a viral moment at the right time. The dream had been met. The idol had looked her in the eye and confirmed what the little girl in Hong Kong had believed about herself since before she could fully articulate it. And still, she hadn't won the competition. The father rumors were still circulating. The global audience that had pressed play 150 million times was already moving to the next thing. The world of fame is not a destination, it's a current. And the current doesn't wait. What she chose to do next is, perhaps, the most quietly remarkable part of the story. She kept singing, not as a comeback, not as a statement, not in the performative way of someone trying to recapture something lost. She kept singing the way she had always sung, because it was what she was made for, because the music asked something of her that she knew how to give, because the joy of it was not contingent on any stage or any audience or any number beneath a video. She continued performing across Asia. Concert appearances, charity events, television showcases. She grew, not just in voice, which deepened and matured with the natural evolution of an adolescent singer who had been trained with genuine care, but as a person navigating the strange afterlife of early fame. She wasn't hiding, and she wasn't chasing. She was working the real, daily, undramatic work of becoming an artist rather than simply remaining a phenomenon. The Ellen DeGeneres Show appearance in 2018 gave her one more window into American audiences, one more moment of mainstream visibility. And she handled it the way she had handled every stage, with that particular quality of presence that had made Simon Cowell stop and pay attention in the first place. The father controversy faded, as most internet controversies eventually do, leaving behind only the faint sediment of an accusation that was never proven and never fully addressed to everyone's satisfaction. Dr. Steve Tam continued to be present in his daughter's life and career. He continued to be her father. The complexity of that role, the nearness of it, the difficulty of separating love from ambition when you are a music teacher whose daughter has the voice you could only ever dream of, remained, as most human complexity remains, irreducible to a verdict. What Celine Tam's story offers, in the end, is not a cautionary tale about fame's dangers, though those dangers are real. It is not a feel-good story about a dream come true, though the dream did, in a specific and astonishing sense, come true. It is something more honest than either of those. It is the story of a little girl who was given a name that meant something, who grew into that name one performance at a time, who stood on a stage at 9 years old and sang for the woman she had been named after without knowing she was watching, and who kept singing after the cameras moved on, and the view counts plateaued, and the next prodigy arrived to take her place in the world's short attention span. She kept singing because the music was never about any of that. It was always just the music. And in a world that consumes talent the way it consumes everything else, quickly, hungrily, and without much thought for what happens to the person being consumed, there is something worth holding on to in that. A young woman standing in the continuing practice of her gift, not despite what fame did to her childhood, but carrying it forward anyway. If this story moved you, share it, because stories like this deserve to be remembered long after the applause fades.